I'm Rob Skinner, and this is the Rob Skinner Podcast. On this episode, I talked to Kip and Bethany Harms from San Luis Obispo, California. Kip and Bethany have planted many churches and have served in churches all over the U.S. Most recently, they took over a church that hadn't had professional leadership in 15 years, and they helped it grow by 50% since they took over. Listen as they talk about how to overcome setbacks and disappointment in the ministry, how to keep the passion burning for Christ at all ages, what they've learned after planting many new churches, and how to approach, lead, and make grow a church that's experienced division and lack of professional leadership for years. All this and more on the Rob Skinner Podcast. Welcome back to the Rob Skinner Podcast. My goal is to inspire you to live a no-regrets life, make this life count, and multiply disciples, leaders, and churches. Please support the Rob Skinner Podcast on Patreon at patreon.com/Rob Skinner. That's patreon.com/Rob Skinner. It's been exciting to come back from the World Discipleship Summit and get back into the work of the ministry. I mean, it's been crazy busy and fun. I've been spending every day on campus, helping out my campus minister, Kevin Liu. Been working with Felipe Marias, and we've just been having a great time reaching out to people and sharing with thousands of people on campus. It was awesome. We had like 15 people at church on Sunday and 15 college students, which was really so encouraging. I mean, to me and to the entire church to see all these people there. And I'm thrilled. I'm really looking forward to what's going to happen this semester on campus. And I'm come back from that World Discipleship Summit determined that it's going to be a great exit from COVID, and we are going to have a brand new period of spiritual growth in our church and in our lives. But I'm also excited because of some new friends I've made with Kip and Bethany Harms. And I've asked them to be on the program here. I've known Kip and Bethany just by name over the years. They've got a great reputation in the kingdom of God. They've been all over the place, truly journeyman ministers. And yet only recently have I gotten to know them because they've moved back to the West Coast. And now they lead the church in San Luis Obispo, which they planted back in the day. And so it's really awesome to have them. And it's funny, I was recently at the Pacific Southwest leadership meeting, and Kip and I sat together and we were just cutting up and just making all sorts of jokes about the past and our personal experiences. I was just laughing. I just felt such a connection with a person who understood my experience, and I feel like I could understand just a little bit about where he came from, but I just thought I got to get to know this guy better. Pam knew Bethany back in the Boston days, and maybe Kip as well, but I wasn't there. And so it's been a real pleasure to get to know them. So Kip and Bethany, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Great to be here. Thank you very much. Thank you for all that you do. And this podcast that's encouraging people all over the place. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Oh man, it's my pleasure to have you. Let's start off with this question. How'd you guys become Christians?
You want to go first?
Sure. Hi, I'm Bethany. It's so great to be with you, Rob. And as you said, Pam and I go way back to UMass. She was like my senior Bible talk leader, hero in the faith. And so I felt like I learned a lot from Pam back in the early days. So it's great to be with you. I actually grew up in Pennsylvania and moved when I was 19. I was taking a gap year from school and was really searching. I wasn't even sure what I was searching for. I mean, I was reading my Bible. I was praying. I grew up in a very Christian-like home. But when I moved to Boston, I thought I took a job as a nanny, and I thought, I'm just going to figure out God on my own. And so I was church hopping when I first got there. And remarkably, a lot of the churches are closed in the summer in Boston, which is really interesting. So I would, when I was driving my little kids around, I would write down addresses of churches I wanted to go visit, and then they would be closed when I got there on Sunday. And so one day at the kindergarten, one of the girls who had just gotten baptized in the Boston Church of Christ I don't even think she told me her name. She just walked up to me and asked me if I would go to church. And I was so blown away because I really had been trying to find my relationship with God. And I went to church with her in the Boston Garden and started studying the Bible. And I became a Christian. I got baptized in like probably 30 days, maybe less. So,
wow.
Yeah. So God had really taken me through my journey to find him at that point.
So that just cracks me up. I go, the thought of a church like shutting down during the summertime, I just go, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
We'll just put the mission on hold for 90 days.
Everybody was on vacations, so nobody was going to church. But I felt like God used that because I think I could have gotten, derailed in really his purpose for me at that point. If some of those places were open, who knows?
Right.
So,
okay. So you were going to UMass Boston at the time?
I wasn't. I had actually graduated high school early and finished at a 2-year school year early. So I took a gap year. Was really kind of running from a relationship in Pennsylvania, feeling like I needed to get away from that, and took a job as a nanny just for fun in Boston. And so when I was met, I wasn't going to school. I wasn't back at the university yet. I later, the next year, went to UMass and finished my degree. So I was with the singles ministry there in the Boston church.
Got it. And how old were you when you became a Christian?
I was 19, just turned 19.
Okay. All right.
Baby.
How about you, Kip?
Well, I'm originally from Phoenix, Arizona.
Mm-hmm.
And so then when I was in 8th grade, my family moved to South Dakota. And so I wrestled in South Dakota and then got recruited and ended up going to Phoenix College, which back then was a really we were second in the nation. So we had a really good wrestling program. And there's a guy on my wrestling team by the name of Brian Hawkins. And he was just pesting me all the time to come to Bible Talk. And I was not interested at all. It was in our second year. I remember it was in January of my second year in college. And he came around and woke me up. I was sleeping on a wrestling mat outside the wrestling room. I had an hour before practice, and he woke me up and said, "Hey, I want you to come to Bible Talk." And honestly, I didn't have a very good response. I actually cussed him out and told him to leave me alone. Then the next week he did the same thing. And then I ended up going to Bible Talk, and I told him to get off my back once I'd go. And then the rest was history. I studied the Bible for 3 months and became a disciple, and of June 19th of 1983. So
it's interesting how many people I've met who went to Bible Talk or church simply to relieve the pressure from someone who's been inviting them over and over again. They're like, okay, we're going to do this and get this done, and they'll leave. And then they walk in and it changes their lives. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. So how'd you guys meet? You're in Phoenix. Bethany, you're in Boston. How'd you guys meet?
Well, about 2 years after I'd become a Christian, there were a bunch of disciples in our church that wanted to go to Boston because Boston was doing things and sending people out. So about 21 of us from that church in Phoenix moved to Boston, and I ended up being part of Bridgewater State Ministry, which is ministry that Bethany was part of. And so maybe you can share how we met.
We have a funny meetup story because I had just come from the singles ministry. So my very first event at UMass Boston with Bob and Lori Tranchel was a leadership campout. And I showed up, and Kip was the guy who was setting up the tents and making hot chocolate and giving out s'more sticks and marshmallows. And I said to the girls that I was with, I said, "I'm going to marry that guy." And they would laugh, and they're like, I said, "I am going to marry that guy." And from that point on, we argue about this, but I'm the one who asked him out on our very first date because I just felt like for some reason I knew that I was supposed to be with Kip. So.
Okay. But see, this is the thing. This is where we argue is in that meeting. I remember I was actually out in the parking lot helping a sister out, and then it came back in, and I was going to ask her out on a date, and she asked me first.
So he says, but I did ask first. I was the bolder one.
Okay, I'll give it to you.
And we started dating, and back in the days, you would date once a month or twice a month, and then
there was a pattern.
Yeah, then we got
right.
got engaged, got married. So That's how we met.
Right.
Campus ministry.
Okay. So from the time you guys met to when you got married, how long was it?
Just under a year, I think.
No, it was probably
Oh yeah, you're just over a year.
I actually don't
We met
know.
we started dating in March, and then the following year in May.
So we knew each other for about a year and a half.
That's awesome.
About a year and
That's
a half.
awesome.
Yeah.
Now, Kip, let me ask you this. Is Kip your real name or is that a nickname?
Yes. It's my real name, Kip Lee Harms. So my parents were watching an old Western on TV, and there was a guy named Kip, and said, well, what do you think about that name? And the funny thing is all my siblings, it's Jeff, Denise, and Greg. And then there's the outlier.
Because in the Kips that I've known, that was a nickname, like,
right.
Like Skip or something like that. And so, okay, well, that's good to know that. So
I'm authentic.
So what year did you guys move? Did you move, Kip, to Boston? What year are we talking?
1985.
Okay. And was that back with like Ken Burford? I mean, who's went with you in that group to Boston?
Oh, well, I mean, I don't even know how many of those people are around now, but it was about 21 of us. You probably wouldn't know them.
Okay.
Yeah, you wouldn't know any of them by name. Ken Burford actually led my first Bible talk I went to at Phoenix College. I mean, it's crazy, because he was the intern back in the day, and now he's the intern up in Flagstaff.
I know. No, he's retired. Oh my gosh, he's such a faithful guy.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just so cool. I mean, I think about those days, and that was not uncommon for people to just get excited and just go, hey, I'm going to go to Boston. I'm going to get more training. Yeah. What was going through your mind when you were leaving Phoenix? I mean, what motivated you?
Well, I had a dream that I wanted to go in the ministry, but I also wanted to make a difference in people's lives. And I felt so purposed in that direction and willing. I mean, my family they were not happy about my decision. They all live in Phoenix,
Right.
And so they weren't happy about my decision at all. But I felt compelled, like, okay, if I'm going to make a difference. And quite frankly, the church that we're in wasn't exactly a great discipling church. There was really a pocket of us that were disciples, and the rest of it was more of a traditional church. And so, moving there seemed to be a very specific calling at that time.
That's awesome.
Hard to explain.
Yeah. No, that's really noble that you kind of went out on faith and decided to do that. Now, since that time, you guys got married, 88 or something like that? 89. You've been all over the place. I mean, if there's one thing that defines you guys have literally been everywhere, to Timbuktu and back. Can you give us an overview of where you've been in your ministry career, how you got into the ministry and where you've been since then?
It's really a cool story about how we got in the ministry. Brock and Ann Roby were leading our campus, UMass Boston at that time, and Bridgewater State was part of that. And we heard they were going on a mission team, but they weren't able to tell us where. And so we were dating at the time, and we said, okay, wherever they're going, we're going. I told them, I said, I don't care if I have to drive a dump truck. I'm going to go wherever you guys go. I mean, Brock and Ann Roby are amazing people.
Yeah.
And they really treated us with dignity and respect. I mean, we just love them immensely. And so then as it progressed, they told us after a Friday night Devo in Boston, Massachusetts, we were down at the subway, and they said, oh, well, we can tell you where we're going, and we want you to come with us. We're going to be going to Hawaii. I mean, honestly, Bethany was thinking, do you think they're going to send us to Russia or something? And we had no idea where we're going. And then they said, well, and there's an added bonus. We're going to have you guys as interns.
Oh,
and it was just such an honor. And I remember just being so overwhelmed with gratitude and excitement, to be honest with you. So it gives me goosebumps just recalling it and everything. So,
I mean,
do you want to add anything?
Well, I think in those days, Boston was sending out so many church plantings, and we had hit the third world and India and, Russia and these different places. So we just assumed we were going to a third world country, and we were trying to figure out what our one suitcase was. And there was a one suitcase challenge that had been, set forth. So what can we shove in one suitcase and go with Brock and Ann? And so it really was so shocking when they said they were going to Hawaii, because we told our parents we were going on a mission team, and they're like, where are you going? I don't know, maybe China, maybe Russia. And they were just so floored when we told them we were going to Hawaii.
And that we didn't know where we were going.
Yeah, that we were kind of crazy faith, and crazy kids.
Yeah.
So.
Wow. Okay. So you went to, that was your first missionary posting.
Right.
1989 when that
Yes.
Correct.
Okay.
We got married and went on our honeymoon to Hawaii and stayed there.
Oh, what a great place to honeymoon.
Yeah.
Okay. So you honeymoon there. There were a lot of churches planted that year. I think Seattle was planted that year.
Los Angeles.
In Los Angeles. Okay. A lot of explosive churches that just took off.
Yeah.
Joe Garman planted the church in Seattle. And then I think Tom Brown was LA, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Our church planting was nicknamed the Lean, Green, and Not So Mean Mission Team.
There were 5 churches planted the same Sunday that we were being sent off, and we were the last kind of introduced as sort of the nobody team.
Yeah.
And nobody really knew any of us, and we were just kind of an experiment, I think, being sent to Hawaii.
Okay, so where were the other 2 teams?
I think, was it Miami that was planted?
Yeah, I
think there was a foreign planting, maybe somewhere in South America. I can't remember, but
yeah, there were 5 that Sunday.
Yeah.
Though.
Can you imagine 5 plantings going off on a Sunday? That gives me goosebumps. I just go, that is so exciting, man. I look forward to that day again to see that happen. That's so thrilling. Okay, so you went there, and then just if you could just give us a broad overview of where you've been, all the different places you've been, and then we'll probably go back and just talk about some of these places specifically.
Okay. Well, we were interns in Honolulu. Then we planted the church in Hilo, Hawaii. And then in 93, we were asked to come to Santa Barbara. So we were in Santa Barbara. I don't know why I remember these things. And then in 98, we were asked to plant the church here in the Central Coast in San Luis Obispo. And then in 2000, we were asked to go to the East region, now Lighthouse?
In Los Angeles.
In Los Angeles. And so we were there. And then in 2003, when everything went awry, we made the decision to come out of the ministry. It was just too much chaos, and our faith was struggling at that point. And so Bethany's dad owns a Christmas tree farm. And so he gave us 15 acres, and we built our dream home on the top of a mountain.
Oh my gosh.
And we were wounded, and I'll talk about Al Baird, but he is this guy who's always been this constant in our life. And I'll share about that a little bit more later, but we were wounded. And then over about 2 years after licking our wounds, Douglas Jacoby does this lesson at the church we were at, and it's called Anchored for Life. And I'm like, I'm not anchored. The church is not anchored, because our church wasn't really connected in relationships. And I said, we got to do something. So we started speaking up. And then what ended up happening is we were asked to lead the mission team planting to State College, Pennsylvania, where Penn State is. And so we said yes. And some amazing things happened in that process. The stories. Yeah, go ahead.
I'd like to share about that, because Kip really missed the ministry when we went out for those 4 years. And I, maybe not so much. I didn't miss it as much, because I felt at peace. I was raising my young children. We were on my family's farm. It was just really peaceful and wonderful. And but Kip would ask me occasionally, do you ever think that maybe we'll go back in the ministry? And I would laugh and go, oh no, this is good. You're making good money. I'm getting to raise the kid. We're happy. And, but I realized I hadn't really beseeched God on that. I hadn't really gone to God about, should we go back? And so I had this prayer time one day, and I just prayed that if it was God's will, I really didn't want to move my kids again. I felt like we had moved them a lot, and I didn't think that was really good for them, through the different moves we made previously. And so Kip called me at where he had driven to Philadelphia one day just to get with Walter Evans and have lunch with him. And he had worn a shirt that said Penn State on it. And when he sat down with Walter's like, I can't believe you have that shirt on. I wanted to meet with you today to ask you guys if you would replant the church at Penn State. And Kip laughed. He's like, I'd love to, but there's no way Bethany's going to want to do this. And thank you for the offer. And he calls me on his way home. And it was literally within a week of that prayer, they had that lunch. And I said to Kip, no, I just started to cry. I was at work. I'm like, no, you have to take that job. Like, this is the prayer. I didn't tell you about it because I didn't want you going looking for jobs. But that God had like answered that prayer immediately after. After.
Okay, so what was the prayer again? What did you pray specifically?
I prayed that if God wanted us back in the ministry, that he would have someone invite us back in, that we wouldn't be out interviewing, because I wasn't convinced that we were supposed to go back into the ministry. And I really needed God to put a stamp of approval on that before I moved my children again. I just, like, my heart just couldn't handle it if I didn't know it wasn't God's will. And so when God answered that prayer so quickly, I couldn't believe. I just was like so convicted, like, okay, we have to go back.
Yeah.
So you're living in your dream home there in Pennsylvania. Where in Pennsylvania?
It's outside of Harrisburg, about 30 minutes.
Near Lebanon? That's the only place I really...
The other direction, towards Carlisle.
Near Carlisle.
Shermansdale was the actual town, but all of my family lived there. My sister and her family, my brother and his family, my parents. We would have barbecues and swim parties. And it was just a little bit of utopia for about 4 years of being...
It was
at this place.
4 houses on a 45-acre plot with Christmas trees, separating.
It must have been amazing during the wintertime.
It was.
Oh, boy.
It was awesome for the kids, the cousins and stuff. It was amazing, 4 years, to be honest with you. It was really good.
So awesome. Okay, so you decide, now it's a replant or a plant? Was there something going on there?
There were probably about 4 disciples there.
Okay.
So it was a replant. And so we rebooted it. And so that was 2007 that we went there. Okay. So we were there for 4 years. And then an opportunity, Doug Wenz, actually, we were in Miami and he asked us if we would be interested in going to Salt Lake City, Utah. And so I had no idea what Utah was all about. It was kind of crazy. And so we went and interviewed. We were interviewing in another larger church, and then we went to Utah and interviewed there. And we get there, and at night we were going up to a devotional, and all the lights of the temples are lit up, and we're like, wow, we're not in Kansas anymore. It was really ominous. We're like, both of us were like, this is wow. It was different. And so our daughter was a disciple. She was a sophomore in high school. And for the first time we asked her, we had an opportunity to go to this one church or to Salt Lake City. One church would have elders, a large church, large teen ministry, campus ministry. And the other church has none of that. 25 disciples, no teens, no campus. Although we just sent someone was just sent as an intern there. And so our daughter prayed about it, and she said, well, everyone's going to want to take that job in the big church. Who's going to want to go to Salt Lake City? So it was kind of a fleece we put out there. And she said, we should go to Salt Lake City. Not that she had the final say, but we were very influenced by it, obviously. Right. So we ended up going to Salt Lake City and saw God do some amazing miracles there. We were, from 25 disciples, we were self-supporting within a year.
Wow. And
God just blessed. I mean, I don't know, feel very blessed there. And then in 2011, our son had moved back to California. He isn't a disciple, and we really wanted to be closer to him. And so we ended up taking a position with Mike Rock in the Inland Empire in Riverside. And we were there for a year when all of a sudden we were asked by people from here if we would consider coming back to the Central Coast. And to be honest with you, this is one of the places we dreamed about coming back because of the people, the culture, the climate, but just felt unfinished business here too. It was a place that had a real connection with me. And so after a little bit of time working out, we moved here in 2017? 18. Yeah, January of 2018.
Okay, wait a second. You were in, let's see, you're in Utah from 2007 to 2011. 2011, you moved to Inland Empire.
I'm sorry, 2011 to 2017. 16, we were in Utah. 5 years in Utah. I may have.
And before that, we were at State College.
State College from 2007.
Okay. So you were in Utah until 2016?
Correct.
Okay. And then you're Inland Empire. And then when did you move to San Luis Obispo?
January of 2018.
Okay. And you've been there for 4 years?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, that's just crazy. All the different places you guys have been. I want to talk to you more about that. Okay. So you've been there. You know, for people that are not familiar with the geography, can you just explain exactly where that is? I mean, most people know generally where LA is, but where's San Luis Obispo?
We're 3.5 hours north of Los Angeles and 3.5 hours south of San Francisco, their downtown districts. So we're right smack dab in the middle.
Okay. And how far are you from the coast?
Our house right now is 1.2 miles.
Oh my God. Now, do you surf, Kip?
No, I'm not. I'm land-based person. It's really cool. Last night we were having family group devotionals, our midweeks out at the beach with meals and everything. And so we were out at the beach with the bonfire last night, and then we had a baptism. It was just amazing. It was a great midweek.
Oh my gosh, that is so. I got to come visit you. Absolutely, I definitely want to. Okay, that's a lot of places you guys have been to. You guys have been from Hawaii to Santa Barbara, San Luis Obispo, Pennsylvania. Salt Lake City. Oh my gosh, that's crazy. And then down to Inland Empire, the desert in Southern California. And now you're back in San Luis Obispo. Why so many moves? That's a lot of moving, even for a minister in the family of churches that we're in. That's you guys probably have a record there.
Well, we have actually a lot more moves that are inside of each of those ministries, which is kind of crazy. And one of the things that we had as young ministers, we were interns and then young ministers, is we had the always say yes attitude. Mm-hmm. And so even in Hawaii, we moved all over Hawaii because there was a need, and they said, "Hey, would you guys move?" And our answer was always yes. I don't think we always use the greatest discernment in some of those decisions. No. Yeah. So when we came out of the ministry after 14 years, we'd moved 15 times.
Wow.
And so all but one of those moves was when we were asked to move somewhere else. And so I think so our hearts were always that. And then when we went back in the ministry, we come back in a different arena and a different era. And when you're asked, now we can actually make decisions and what's best for us and our family. And to be honest with you, the ways we made decisions was we prayed and we talked with each other, but I got a lot of advice, and Albert was my go-to guy all the time, and so he did our wedding, and on our anniversary every year, he calls us just to encourage us.
Wow.
He called us from South Africa. He's called us from Cairo on our anniversary. And so he's been that constant in our life, but he's the guy I call first thing on my, "What do you think, Al?"
Right.
And so just having that heart of saying yes is always that I'm willing to do whatever God wants me to do.
Wow. That's, I just got to give a little shout out to Albert. That guy is really an amazing guy. What a servant. He's helped me so much here in Tucson, and we've just gotten to know each other over the past couple of years, really, and it's been awesome. So that's great. You have someone like that in your life. Yeah. What's your perspective on it, Bethany?
Yeah, I think, we obviously went into the ministry young, married, no children, and we were super willing. And I think we were good at being a right-hand couple a lot. So we were shifted around to be able to start the military ministry, start the campus ministry, start the team ministry, which we had a lot of flexibility. I think when we got to LA, some of those moves were very painful. Moving from Hawaii to Santa Barbara was very painful. I mean, I remember being at the airport with the whole, in those days, the whole church could come to the airport. There was not much security and people just crying and giving us lays. Like we never, probably 90% of our moves, we never wanted to make. Like we were loving where we were. We loved our church. We loved our people. And we were, in those days, you were just moved. If you wanted to stay in the ministry and they needed you somewhere, there wasn't a whole lot of options.
Right.
So
You're just transferred. I mean, it's like working for IBM or something. It's like, hey, we're shifting you over here.
Yeah, we need you here, we need you there. And so I think the last couple moves before we went out of the ministry were super painful for me, for my children. And I felt like by 2003, I was just kind of worn out by that, because I feel like we really did give our hearts where we were. And then having to leave was challenging, especially for me and the kids, I think. So, and for Kip, but.
Okay. But since 2003, it's a different era.
Yeah.
You have a lot more autonomy about where you go. You still have made quite a few moves. Any advice that you'd give? Like what goes through your mind when you're trying to make a move? Because I think people, whether they're younger, they're going, they're getting recruited for a campus ministry position, or, hey, this there's a lot of openings for staffing all over the place.
Yeah.
And it can be really tough to know what to do. Any advice that you give on making a good decision when there's uncertainty?
I would like to believe we're making better decisions in this stage of our life. But I think a number of things is, I want to be used by the ministry. God needs to make it clear that where I go, I can really have a great effect and great impact. And so allowing that to be a big part. And honestly, as I said before, we've never made a big decision in our family without me calling Albert and a couple other brothers who are confidants with us. And so I think making sure you're getting advice on it too, because they know you, people that know you will know if that's a good fit or not. Mm-hmm. And I think having that right heart to say yes, though, and go somewhere that you may not want to go, having that heart is pretty amazing. Mm-hmm. Well, it's a surrender that you get. So
I think also looking at your skill set, like, will my skill sets be used and valued in this place? Do I have a connection with the discipling relationship that I'm going to have? I think is a big thing in our day too. Like, can I see a good connection? Can we be a good team? And then I think, there's big church, small church, what can I learn being at a small church? I think recognizing the value in being in a small church and it being more like family, or, feeling like, oh, my need is to be in a bigger church and serve in this bigger platform. So I think some of it is, as the older generation, I think even helping the younger generation see where they may fit better, because it takes a lot of endurance. I've noticed with our interns, and when you're challenged, people that when they come to a small church, can they handle that loneliness, without having a big crowd of people, right. Or are they, maybe not best suited for that? And so I think there's, kind of a personality and character strength and weakness set to be evaluated.
Right. Yeah. You guys have, I mean, it's like you're moving every 4 years or something like that. You're going into different situations. Do you have a philosophy? Do you have an approach when you walk into a new situation? Like, okay, we pull out this toolkit. This is what we're focused here for the first 90 days or first year. Like, what do you try to do?
Well, our biggest philosophy is we want to lead through consensus, that we don't make the final decision on big decisions in our church, we have a group of people, a leadership group that is around us, and we collaborate and work together as a team. And our constant goal is to build family. Like this summer, we took a break from meeting just men and women, and we met all together as the whole entire church. And Beth and I prepared food. So we said, just come with your family and eat. And it's just family. We didn't even have lessons, but the kids played kickball and, so everything is about building family. So if you build family with the consensus group, it gives you the platform to build family with the church. And so creating memories, doing fun activities, things that people look back, wow, that was amazing hanging out with the family. And so that's kind of our general philosophy. Anything to add, babe?
Yeah, I think that's how we kind of approach building the church. It's really what Brock and Ann trained us in. It's kind of all we know that we really love and enjoy is come in, build a family, plan things that will be great memories for the church. I think a personal thing that I try to do when we've moved is pick 5 women and put them on a group chat. And I'm just going to be open. Like, it's kind of my vulnerability group. Like, okay, just wanting to get known really fast, strengths and weaknesses. And I think that can promote, mutual vulnerability. But I know if I get to a place and I don't just immediately give my heart, it gets harder and harder the longer I'm there. Right. And so I think that's been something we've tried to do right away is, find our core group that we can trust here.
Okay, so you try to find a core group, but what if the church is troubled? And that, I mean, in my experience, they usually are. I mean, there's distrust, there's hurt from the past, there's people have taken offense at different situations, there's anger, all sorts of stuff in a situation. How do you build a core group when the church can be in a very difficult situation?
Well, I think coming here, we came to a church that had 2 church splits already. And so we were bringing a group back together that weren't together before we got here. And so they were willing to come back, but there was definitely trust issues and unresolved conflict. And then we were bringing in Santa Barbara generously gave us their most northern family group to be part of this group to kick it off. And so we had really 3 diverse groups. Yep. And 2 of which had split from each other. And so I think it has been amazing to see what God has done, but we definitely understand that concept of, okay, we got all kinds of stuff going on and feelings. And so we just, asked a few people, could you lead this group, lead that group? And we pulled them all together, and we meet once a month. We go out to dinner, we go to a winery, we have a meeting, we cook for them, but it has just been time and trust that we've had to work on building, but we've had to be able to rely on them to come together. And we had to start with the core group first to deal with relational problems that we had. And so we started there, and then we just, kept taking one piece at a time throughout the church to get things resolved.
Yeah, it wasn't easy. Here was probably the most challenging, and still is not the easiest place, because there's still some consternation, even in our consensus group. But the real core is, if we treat everyone with dignity and respect, and that they have a seat at the table, then they get buy-in. And that's the big part that I think has helped overcome some of that. The first year that we got here, there was a couple on our core group that didn't play well with others, and we ended up having to ask them to come out of the core group, and they ended up leaving the church. But that is the challenge when you come into a church that's been separated from being influenced by other churches for 15, 20 years. Right. Even Salt Lake City was a little different. They were very disconnected too, but the core group there, everybody wanted to be connected. So that's an easy turnkey type situation. Whereas here, there's still an element of complexity to it, but helping people feel respected is a really big thing that we try to do. And I'm fortunate I'm married to the right woman that helps me with that. So I'm very blessed.
Well, you guys strike me as so down to earth. I mean, just really salt of the earth, just, good people just in general. But I mean, that would be such a tricky situation. Now, I remember when this situation was happening, I can't remember. I think I was talking to Ron Hammer or something. I think he knew you and what was going on there. And I just remember thinking, this is a great situation, because you guys planted the church in San Luis Obispo. So in that, I mean, that must have helped you, having been kind of the parents of the original church. I mean, that must give you some benefit. How has that worked out?
You want to go?
I think that did help. I think it opened the hearts of the church here to hire somebody back, because the church hadn't had a full-time minister since 2003.
Wow.
And so I think because we had history here, and people, a small group of people that were still here from those days knew us, I think that really did open a door for trust. But it was still, there was still a lot of skepticism, and are we going to go back to legalistic times and all of that, and having to show a new culture and grace. I think there's been a lot of grace given and received in the church up to this point, but that definitely opened the door for us to come.
Yeah.
So go ahead, Kip.
It's tricky, because when you're dealing with people who have hurts and maybe have serious trust issues, even with people that knew us, they still have trust issues, not always specifically with us, but just as with the church. And so trying to help them feel heard and yet call them higher is tricky business. Right.
So how can you explain, what was the situation you walked into when you returned to San Luis Obispo? How many people are we talking about? What did it look like to you?
Well, there were 42 disciples. There were about 17 from Santa Maria, which is about 45 minutes south. And then we had about 12 disciples that were north, and everyone else is in the San Luis Obispo 5 cities area. There was tension still within the leadership group. So we came into a situation where there was unresolved conflict, and we worked hard to try to resolve that. And so, but trust is a hard thing to build, and we're still working on it, I think. And I don't think that'll ever change, because when there's scarring, there's going to be a result from that. And
right.
So
it's interesting though, when you talk to some of the members, like one of the members of the church said to me the other day, it's just been so seamless, bringing everybody back together. And I'm like, I'm glad you see it that way. It hasn't felt very always seamless to me, but I think that from probably the outside perspective, those who weren't involved in some of the controversy were just so happy to be back together and so happy to be back connected to the sister churches. And so, but we're spread out. We're like an hour and a half from end to end, where, up and down the coast. And so it's, that creates its own issues, right? When you're not all just living in the same, 30-minute area. So we've had to be super creative with that piece too.
Okay. So you started with 42. I mean, just getting them back together to worship together, that's an achievement in itself. How do you, have you been able to baptize? Has the church grown at all? How does a person walk in? Because there's a lot of situations like this where you've been able to patch it up, which is a miracle in itself, but how do you grow it?
Well, I think we were blessed the first year. We had quite a few baptisms, and right now our membership is 64.
Wow.
So I think we've seen some great things happen. And we've also had the benefit of a few key people have moved into the area too. So that helped us. We have one of the families in our consensus group, they moved in from Santa Clarita, actually Ron Hammer's ministry. And so they're very supportive, and they want to see great things happen. So, it hasn't grown like we've experienced in other church plantings, but it's growing in its forward direction. I mean, we had a baptism last night with everybody out at the beach with a bonfire at the midweek. And so that was encouraging for the church. So I think we're now turning. And I think the big part is we're at a place financially. So we have a full-time campus intern and a part-time man, and then a part-time female intern for campus just came here last week.
Okay. How do you do that? You only have 64 people and you guys are full-time, and then you've got a full-time and a part-time.
Yeah.
God is so amazing, because we have some outlying givers who give to this church who don't even go to this church or don't live in this city. And so we have a family that kind of single-handedly supports our interns.
Yeah.
And so just because of their generous gifts. So God has just given us from the outside. It's really the reason we can do this.
It's crazy. Yeah. I mean, there's money coming in from places we don't know. And so when I look at the contribution and see what's happening, I'm like, well, we're just blessed beyond. So some of this is relationships we built through the years, and they said, hey, we believe in what you're doing. We're going to give to your ministry.
Yeah.
And so I'm not going to say no.
Of course not. Of course not. Were those people you knew, or were they just interested in the area and they just thought, hey, we want to support the work? Or was it requested by you, or was it unsolicited? It
was unsolicited, and it's two couples that we at a time put them both in the ministry, and they're not currently in the ministry now, two of the couples. And then we've had other people who's like, we have a college student whose daughter's here, and this particular individual said, hey, I want to give to your work there because I believe in what you're doing. And so we have a couple others that give not as much as some of those givers. So it really puts us in a amazing place financially, and to be able to be 64 and have interns is
you need it. You need it. Okay. So San Luis Obispo, there's a really great school there at San Luis Obispo. How big is it? Can you describe the college?
Cal Poly is 36,000 students. It's a engineering school. It's very difficult to get in. We know of 4 kids that were trying to get in. none of them got in for this fall semester quarter. So it's a great school. Ronnie Carrillos we hired last year, and he had 3 baptisms on campus for the first year.
Wow.
And so now I think with our Cuesta College, it's a junior college, I think we have a combined total of 12 kids.
That's
and
great.
So we're moving forward in that regard. But it's difficult to even people that want to move here. It's such a good school. It's hard for kids to get into.
And you know that, Kip, that's awesome, because one of the things I talked about at the World Discipleship Summit in my class is every church getting to be at least 20% of your ministry being college students. And so with 12, you've got 20% right there. That must make a difference in the spirit of your church.
That's one of our philosophies too, is wherever we go, we got to get the campus going, because that's the lifeblood of the church. And if you can't get if you're in a place where you don't have a campus, it's going to hinder you a little bit, because seeing young people become Christians it's the future.
Yeah.
And so I pray for our future, and I pray for this campus to really build something that's going to be able to affect people for years and years to come.
That is so cool. What do you say to people that say, "Oh, why are you so focused on college students? They just move away. They just leave town, go different places." How do you handle that criticism that comes up from older disciples?
I think it's part of the beauty of the kingdom, right? We can convert them, and yes, they may move away, but we're setting their whole course of their life like in the right direction, and God can use them all over. And so some of that, being a giving ministry and being able to go, like even at Penn State, the kids couldn't get jobs there unless you worked for Penn State. There was nothing really other than maybe one engineering firm that you could work at in that area. So most of what we converted would later graduate and move away. Those kids, they're so significant in the ways they can help other churches. And so
Sure about Kelly.
Yeah, when we were at Penn State, we converted this swimmer. She was captain of the swim team at Penn State.
Wow.
And she studied for a year. She came over to our house every Thursday. I made her dinner and brownies. And she, she's a faithful disciple in the Philly church. She just got engaged this week. Like, I think, she had to move away. She couldn't work there. She couldn't find her profession there. But boy, what she's going to do with her future.
Yep.
So I think it's having a bigger picture than just our church, that we are a brotherhood, and letting our kids, make choices and move away and have an impact is really great.
We've discussed this too. Even for us, we would be willing to take a pay cut in order to have a campus ministry, because that's the future. Most of our evangelists who are in our churches now came from campus ministry.
Right.
That's the future of our ministry. And so I think going hard for the campus it's not an option.
Right.
It's something we need to seek hard.
Right. We're in Tucson. We're definitely going for it. We started this year with 3 returning students after having a ministry of up to like 23. And so, it's like we're starting over here. And so we have 3 kids who came in as freshmen, which we're super grateful for, great people. And we're just determined. We're just going after it because we believe that. And it's so funny. Like I mentioned at the beginning, we had our first service. Kevin did a great job the first couple of weeks, just reaching out. We've been all, just trying to help. And having all those kids at church on Sunday, these first timers visiting, like 15, it was like, it energized the church.
Yeah. Totally.
It was just, and it energized me. From young to old, I gave people a little heads up. There's going to be some college students, some new faces. Please greet them. But people were talking about it. It brings life to a mature ministry for sure. So that's awesome. You're doing that.
When we moved here in our ministry, there was only one person under 30 in the church here. of the 42 that we started with.
Right.
And so, I called it the gray hair ministry. I was at a midweek and I said, guys, look around. Some of you don't have hair and all of us have gray hair. We got to change this,
Okay. Well, that's happening across our family of churches. We're just, getting to middle age and late middle age. So one of the things that stands out to me about you guys and in our private talks is you guys have gone through some major challenges, big time challenges. How do you keep your faith and your idealism burning brightly? That's what stands out to me about you guys. Like, you guys have had challenges, and any veteran of our family of churches who's gone through it, and I think ministry in general is super, super tough.
Yeah.
But you guys are still fired up. You're still happy. You're still idealistic and faithful. How'd you preserve that? Like what kind of mental tricks are you guys doing to kind of keep that going? What, you got some Jedi mind tricks or something? What's because I've unfortunately I've seen a number of people that just they get hurt and they just get angry and they're gone.
Yeah. I know this may sound like a bumper sticker, but the Bible has not changed in all the years I've been a Christian, so I keep leaning on that. And we were having the joke at the Southwest Evangelist, did they burn out or did they sin out? That's kind of the thing, And we've seen that in a lot of people. And so, one, you got to get your faith back to the Word, because people are flawed, and I'm flawed. And so if people expect perfection from me, they will be sadly disappointed. But I think one of the crucial things for us, and I don't know if we didn't orchestrate it, God did, but we've had vital people in our life through the turning points of our life, helped us stay connected to the church and also to God. And I mentioned earlier that Al would call us. He hunted me down because he couldn't find my number when we moved to Pennsylvania. We were so damaged at that time. And I remember him calling and saying, "Bro, I've been trying to get a hold of you." And because we changed our numbers, everything. And he's just appealing to me, "Bro, how you doing?" and trying to help me and change my life at that time, because we're so wounded. And so having people that are going to chase after you. I know Jesus didn't chase after the rich young ruler, but I wasn't rich and I wasn't a ruler. But someone like Al Baird, and then we've had crucial turning points in our life where there have been men and women who have encouraged us. And we always want to be connected with other people. And it's a big part of our ministry. Ron and Cheryl Hammer have been just a joy building a friendship with them over the last 4 years. And so I think staying connected, obviously, to the Word, but staying connected to people, because that bitterness is, it's a prickly pear that can just torture you if you don't get resolved. Right. You have any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, we've definitely gone through our fair share of challenges, and I think resiliency and suffering are, we will suffer in this lifetime, like the Bible promises us that. But I think in the suffering, I just remember Gloria Baird always saying, "Don't waste it. Don't waste your suffering. What are you supposed to learn to keep yourself from circling back on this wheel again?" Because sometimes our suffering is at our own hands and our own lack of spirituality. And then sometimes it's at the hands of others and, life. But in that don't waste your suffering, I felt like, being able to learn through it and take personal responsibility for what we could own in a suffering situation, and then being able to forgive. I mean, there's just a lot of instances in our life where we've had to forgive without the apology, without the making up part, without the, what you hope would come from another direction, but forgiving because Jesus forgave us. And I think that piece of bitterness, we've realized, wow, old age, the sin of bitterness is the one that will take you out.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Not impurities usually, and not, drunkenness or those things, but bitterness because we feel entitled to have been treated a certain way. And I think being able to trust God in those situations that we don't always get a resolve that we hope for, but we also don't want to hang on to bitterness that will grow up and defile many, and there was a time when we came out of the ministry, I told Kip, I don't even know if I can read my Bible. Like, I mean, our phones stopped ringing. We were like alone. And Al and Gloria called. They would call and call and call. But Kip just said, "What in the Bible do you really love? What'll really help you?" And I said, "The Psalms." He goes, "Read the Psalms. Just read the Psalms." So I appreciated his faith. And I read the Psalms for an entire year. I couldn't get out of the Psalms. But it healed my heart, and I think, like Kip said, leaning into people and letting people know where you're at. I think we've had to learn that over the years. Larry and Lori Head have been just a great support and comfort for us. Ron and Connie Cosberg.
Oh, yeah.
The Hammers, the Bairds, just different people.
And the Robies, you can lean into them anytime. Yeah. And they give such sage advice.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, sometimes I'll hear their advice and I'll go, I think I have a bad heart.
We were at the World Discipleship Conference, and Brock said, "Can I sit down with you guys for a minute?" He sat down with us for 5 minutes and said something to Kip that was life-changing in, some of the struggles that are currently going on. And it was life-changing, a 5-minute conversation, and I think just having that openness to hear what others have to say, to speak truth into us when we're, wrestling through something and can't quite land.
It's funny you mentioned that about Brock. My mom died this last summer, a month or two ago, and I saw Brock in San Francisco, and he just pulled me aside and just shared some things with me that really helped me. I mean, it was such a painful time, and but I didn't ask him for the help. He just on his own just said, "Hey, here's some thoughts," and it just came at the right time with the right words. It wasn't a long sermon or anything, just a few minutes, and it really helped me at an incredibly painful time. So having those people in your life makes such a huge difference. I love Brock and Ann.
We've been blessed to have a lot of people that we can lean into in those troubling times. So
yeah. So if you guys were talking to someone who maybe used to be in the ministry or used to be in leadership and yet have become really jaded, angry, upset about the bad old days or whatever it might be, or a particular relationship that went sour or something that really offended them, and now they're on the sideline, they're on the bench, what would you tell them?
I think what comes to my mind, first of all, even with Brock and Ann, like we were always encouraging them to go back into the ministry because we saw their gifts. I mean, their gifts are amazing. But I think for people to be able to find a safe person to talk through, first of all those unresolved, issues that are just making them feel angry, making them feel like they can't move past it. I think that has really helped us. It's that mental health part, like taking care of your mental health and being able to talk to trusted disciples or, especially I think people that we respect in the ministry, to be able to be heard on those issues, but then to be able to see that, God still has a vision for them. I felt like when we came back, we had so much encouragement from people, like, we're so happy you're back. We've all seen that, people coming back into the ministry, and God has not done with them yet, and some of the experience and wisdom and talent and gifts or whatever God has given us through our time and our history in the ministry, that he still wants to use it, and that we all still believe in you. Like, we want you to come back. We need your help. Like, we need more ministers.
The kingdom needs you.
God needs us, to keep, to use our strengths to the very end.
Yeah. I would say also to examine for yourself, what does bitterness look like and what does forgiveness look like? Mm-hmm. And I think that's the thing, because bitterness is the thing that will take a lot of people out anyways. And if you hold on to things, and I'm blessed to be married to the right woman. There's a couple that hurt us pretty bad, and we went to Gloria's memorial service, and they were there. And, I read a book called Ron Hammer actually recommended How to Forgive What You Can't Forget. And so I have a hard time, and I have a justice component. There needs to be justice here. And what is, and so we were at the memorial, and this couple was there, and Bethany says, "Let's go say hi to them." I'm like, "Nope." You can go.
Right.
And she said, "Honey," she looked at me and she says, "We need to go say hi." So I went over and said hi. It was so good for me. I mean, because it broke down a lot of those things. Even though I'm wrestling with forgiving and I conscientiously are trying to forgive, but having that opportunity, and fortunately having a wife that's going to push me beyond my comfort zone and learning how to forgive. And so it's not that I forget those things, but I really have come to a place of peace with those things a lot better. Not that it still doesn't affect me.
Right.
But identifying bitterness and what forgiveness, spiritual forgiveness, would really look like.
I know. It's you guys are such a great example of people who have immense talent and ability and experience, but came back online. You guys, worked through whatever it was that was holding you back, and then you guys got back online, and now you're just advancing the kingdom. To see 50% growth in a church that was split 3 ways, I just go, who's doing that? And yet, like you said, Bethany, what would how would the kingdom be different if everyone who was in a similar situation got out of the stands, off the bench, back onto the playing field, back onto the court, and started doing what you guys are doing? I mean, we would just have an explosion. We'd have a revival.
Yeah.
I mean, it'd just be so amazing because the talent's there.
Yeah.
And now we got the money too, because a lot of people have made money in the secular world. The money is out there and the talent, but it's Satan who's really basically taken people off the playing field through this very thing. Yeah. But what's interesting about you guys is, okay, you guys work through your hurts, but your idealism, your passion's there too. How'd you get that? I mean, you're still idealistic about making disciples. I mean, you're not just like, okay, we patched up the relationship. Now we're good. Now we're just going to keep on going and raise Christmas trees in Pennsylvania.
Well, I mean, you know this. I mean, I think the ministry is somewhat a big part of it is being called to it. And, if I see that I can make a difference there, why would I not do it? Mm-hmm. And to me, I mean, that might sound really simple to some people, but to me, it's a big deal, and when you see a need, and having that heart to do that is to fill that need. I want to stay at that place. It's not always easy, but I fight to be there. Yeah. Go ahead. What do you think?
Well, I think we really love studying the Bible with people, and I think that's kind of where we get filled up the most. And so when you see a life change, it doesn't take a lot of baptisms, I think, to keep your passion, because you see one life change and, it's really kind of what it's all about. So I think for us, we just try to take, what God gives us to be able to pour into who we can train and who we can study with. But to me, I just feel like that always kind of comes back to our own conversions and remembering how God took us off this crazy path and stuck us on, put us in the kingdom and gave us a future.
Right.
And so to me, I feel like that's where some of my passion comes from.
I think that's the thing, is that if Satan can sideline you, then he can allow bitterness to be your tackling fuel. And then you stop touching the future. Right. And you stop being part of the solution. And the solution is helping people become Christians and helping people stay Christians.
Right.
So,
Yeah, it's really, you guys have such an impressive story, and I really appreciate what you've done. Let's just change the subject here a little bit. We'll change the channel. On your screensaver, and we've got a Zoom podcast, I see a dune buggy. What's the story behind that?
My family raised, when I was probably 6 years old, my dad bought a dune buggy, and at least once a month and twice a month, we lived in Phoenix at the time, we would go to the dunes, and it was the thing that we did. And so we got quads. Well, back then it was 3-wheelers, then quads and sand buggies. And so my family held that culture for a long time. I moved to Boston, and my brothers got sand buggies and their kids got sand buggies. So we would meet at the dunes a lot. It was our family thing that we did. It's kind of painfully, they all just sold their rigs last year. So that legacy is kind of gone, but it was a big part of our family. And so camping and the whole connectivity of that. So that's why it's kind of a legacy in our family.
When you say the dunes, where are you talking about?
At the corner of Arizona and California and Mexico is Yuma, and just about 20 miles west of there is Imperial Sand Dunes, and it's a place where grown men can play with their toys in the sand and go really fast.
Okay, you got to tell me, what was the scariest accident you've ever had in a sand dune?
Oh, well, I haven't been part of scary sand dunes, but I've seen a couple people die out there because they got T-boned by a bike, got T-boned by that. The sand buggies, we roll them and you just throw them back over and you're riding off again. So, but if you collide with another vehicle, and which is rare, so I haven't been in any really bad accidents. Although my brother flipped with my dad once, and my brother was in the passenger seat, and my brother was completely under the sand. My dad had to dig him out of the sand.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, he was freaking out a little bit. So he was about 12 years old at the time. So
you've seen a couple people die out there.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I remember door knocking when I was selling real estate in the early 2000s, and this lady opened the door and she was in a full body like cast, her neck.
Wow.
I said, what happened? She said, I came up over a sand dune, and, broke my neck, basically.
Wow.
So I don't share those things with my wife, because I like motorcycles. Okay.
Yeah.
And another thing, it's weird, Kip, because I've been talking to all these wrestlers, A.T. Arneson, and different people that come from a wrestling background. You wrestled. Can you tell me a little bit about that and what that taught you?
Well, to be able to grind, and wrestling is that endurance sport, and those, you just have to push through it, the whole suck it up buttercup type of thing. So I think that was a big part of character building for me. It's kind of wild, when I studied the Bible, the person studying with me thought that was an idol in my life. So he told me he asked me to completely give up wrestling. And it was hard. Before I got baptized, I decided that I'm going to give it up, and so I didn't pursue wrestling or anything. And then I moved to Boston in '85, and an opportunity afforded itself for me to become the head wrestling coach at this college I was at. So God gave it back to me. And so I was able to be there and be part of a sport that I loved. And I converted several people from the wrestling team, which was really kind of cool. So God gave it back to me in spades, and he also bore fruit from it.
So you were a college wrestler.
Right.
And I know Mike Rock was a wrestler, A.T. Arneson, and some other people that are escaping me at this point. What was your weight class?
In high school, I wrestled 155. I cut down from 185 to 155. And in college, I cut down from 205 to 167.
Oh my God. How? Tell me how. That's like 40 pounds.
Yeah. I put myself on really strict diets, fish and liver with vegetables. And so a lot of discipline, quite frankly. And I think probably, just fortitude, and that back then everyone believed that your leanest that you are, the better your body will perform, but also you lose muscle mass and other things.
Right.
It was tough, but I think once again, it was something that really helped me in my character.
Now, Bethany, was that something that attracted you to Kip? He was like super hunk.
Kip's muscles, yeah.
Yes. Besides the serving attitude and everything.
He was very good looking. Yeah, he is very good looking. Yeah, that did attract me.
I feel so objectified.
That's awesome. Okay, so you guys, let's switch the scene to Hawaii. You guys face some highs and some lows there in Hawaii. Can you talk about that?
Oh, the highs were being with Brock and Ann Roby and seeing God do crazy miracles. I mean, with 21 disciples, we saw 45 people baptized in the first 6 months of the church planting.
That's amazing.
And I remember weird numbers too. I don't know why, but at the end of 1 year, we had 114 members. And the highs were being able to work with Brock and Ann Roby. They just were our friends, and they treated us they weren't our boss. I never felt that they were our boss. And so that was, the high, and the lows. When we had our challenges initially, I think we spoke a little bit about a couple that were really grinding us. They'd come into town and grind us a little bit. And that was really challenging. But our relationship with the Robys really it was tough to leave Hawaii. It was tough to leave them. And, it was a big transition. So I think those are some of them. I don't know if you want to share on that too.
I look back at Hawaii as just such a beautiful time, such an amazing faith building time. I mean, so many people became Christians, and they would, we met this one girl. She actually hit me with her bike when we were walking across campus, and she wound up becoming a Christian, and she converted 10% of her private high school.
Yeah.
Later in the next 2 years, all these girls became Christians, and just to see the vines of people that became Christians through the family spirit of Hawaii was amazing. And I always look back at that time with just such gratitude. The struggles we were going through were hard for sure, but it didn't have anything to do with Hawaii or the islands or our love for what we were doing there. It was just, I think, us having to figure out our own personal motivation. We're going to serve God, we're going to love God, even if, we aren't feeling believed in, or we aren't feeling, patted on the back,
Right.
we still had to just keep focusing on God and what God wanted us to do there.
Now, you guys are just about as white comes going to Hawaii. Was that a challenge there? I mean, you're going to a place where you're in the minority. What challenges did you face there with that?
Well, we probably felt it more initially when we went to Hawaii. We led the campus ministry, which it's more colorblind than the rest of Hawaii anyways. I think that when we went to Hilo, Hawaii, that was a bigger challenge because us being white, we're sharing our faith with lots of people, and we'll have like 5 or 6 people committed to coming to Sunday, and none of them will show up. And we'll talk to some of the people local and go, well, you ain't from here. You're not from here. And so people don't trust you, but they'll say yes, just to get you out of their face. And so, I mean, even with a small church planting in Hilo, we would have like 50, 60 commitments for church on Sunday, and we'd have 5 come from that number of commitments, people who said they'll come to church that Sunday. And so there was definitely a cultural divide that we were faced with when we went there. And so that's why I've always been a proponent for get the locals in there leading these churches, because they really have an opportunity to make a great difference there.
Right. Well, I'm really happy that Brad Tomashiro is there along with Gary
Thank you
Ropes.
for him.
I know. It's really exciting because Brad's as local as they get. He and Alicia, his wife, and I'm just praying that work just can, really grows and takes off, because he's a great guy.
Yeah. For sure.
But that's really impressive there, that work. When you look back, I mean, there's so many great memories I have from pre-2003. I mean, it's just such an inspiring time. And at the same time, there were some challenges for sure that we're aware of. But what do you feel like, if you could bring anything back from that time period and put it back in, what do you feel like you'd like to see a little more of these days, in the positive sense?
From the church, from people in the church, the culture? Is that kind of the question? Okay. To me, it just gets back to this all in. If we could get everyone all in, can you imagine what we could do if we were all in?
Right.
And I think there are times when we went to Hawaii with 21 disciples, everyone was all in.
Right.
And what a amazing thing. God can work with all in people in an amazing way. And I think that because of some of the history of our church, a lot of people have lost that all in, and people have gotten side railed with the what's in it for me. And if we can get our church to all in, I mean, that would be amazing.
Right.
It's kind of my thought.
Yeah. And I think to get back to believing that our one invitation or our one, time that we push ourselves in courage really makes a difference. That we just had such a expectation in those days of, you were at the store, maybe that person would become a Christian if I invited them.
Right.
Like more of that just faithful expectation of God. And I think I'm not sure what that word is, but the stronger character of just pushing hard and not in a sinful way, but just what word am I looking for?
Well, I would use the word grind at times.
Not grind, not in a negative way, but like a perseverance, maybe like a deeper perseverance.
No, I absolutely agree. And I think that's, I think about that. I think, okay, what if everyone were all in?
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate, because I think many times people feel like because they've had some bad experiences, they've got a pass for not being all in, that somehow that gives them the ticket off of the cross-bearing ride. It's like, don't have to carry my cross any longer because I've been hurt. One thing I've been studying a lot recently is Jesus's suffering. And, just thinking about Isaiah chapter 53, where it says it was the Lord's will to crush him and cause him to suffer. And, I've been thinking a lot about that. I've had some hits recently with my mom passing away and different things like that. And just like, man, how would I like it if my dad, his will for my life were,
right,
hey son, I'm going to crush you. I'm going to cause you to suffer. And that wouldn't be very encouraging. And yet that's what makes Jesus so great. And I've just had to kind of come to the way I've kind of worked through it mentally is like, hey, I'm a co-heir with Christ. I'm a son of God too. And guess what?
Yeah.
You're going to suffer, Rob. And
Wow.
if I don't accept that, I'm going to be a very unhappy person. And I'm going to be rejected. There's going to be times where, people don't accept my message, and whether they're family members or whether they're people that I meet, I just go, okay, this is what it means to know Christ and to share in his suffering. And I think that's, just been thinking a lot about what Paul wrote there when he said, I want to know Christ, the power of his resurrection, and sharing in his suffering.
Yeah.
And so, I think when I think about your lives, I think about people who are children of God and who have endured that suffering. And yet that's how you know Christ. I'm sure that
Yes.
your challenges have opened up insights into your relationship with God you probably wouldn't have seen otherwise.
Yeah.
Sure, yeah.
I think reminded even a book Gordon wrote years and years ago, The Victory of Surrender. And that is, I think, isn't that the constant calling of every disciple, is to get to that place? That's the victory to get to a place of surrender.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I think that the tricky part is when we look back to the past, we go, oh, there was suffering. There are bad things that happened. And yet I go, okay, just because we suffered doesn't necessarily mean it was bad. I mean, there's always a positive side to everything that we go through. So just a little side note there, really interesting talking to you guys. Let me ask you this final question. What advice would you give to a person who really wants to make their life count?
There's a couple things I would think of. One is be willing to say yes. I mean, having a willing heart is a pretty amazing thing, and maybe say yes to something that would be very uncomfortable for you. And I think that would be advice. But as we talked about earlier, I think making sure you have support people around you that you can lean into when times get rough, and can, pity the man who has no one to help him up. And I think that we've been so blessed with the right kind of people in our life, even sometimes at the right time. And sometimes it was just a window of relationship for a year or two, but that window got us through a very tough time. And so making sure you have a network of people, but also really examining, how can God most use me, and be willing to get to that place of surrender with that. Do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's good. And I think being willing to take risks. Life is short, right?
Right.
So we only have so many years to take risks and take opportunities that come to us, and make the most of them, because we never know what will come out of that one opportunity, how it can lead you to another place. And so I think when we have that heart of wanting our life to count, God will bring opportunity to us, through our prayers and through people and through situations, and being willing to jump in and take risks. And you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to know everything. You don't have to know all the Greek in the Bible. You don't have to be a teacher.
Right.
You can be who you are, and God can use you with your talents and your interests and your gifts in so many ways, beyond our imagination, if we let him.
Right.
And sometimes it's that fear. I know for me, fear is, if I didn't have Kip is like the courage of our relationship. If I didn't have Kip, I'd never move. I'd never do anything differently. I'm very routine oriented, and Kip pushes me out of my comfort zone through having courage. And so I've learned a lot through our marriage of taking risks and stepping out, and not feeling like you have to have all the answers when you do that.
That's awesome. So saying yes, having people around you, being willing to take risks. That's awesome. It's funny you say that, because that was Pam and I, when we were young in our marriage, we just said, we're not going to say no. If whatever we're asked, we're going to just do it. And I'm so glad, because that led us to go to Japan for 10 years. Wow. A couple other people had been asked, they said no. And so we were like third on the list. And guess what? We said yes. And that just was awesome. I mean, I'm so glad that we made that decision to say yes and take the risk. I think it's so smart. And having those people in your life. There's just one other thing that came to me. When you think about all the places that you planted and led, how does that make you feel? All the people whose lives you've changed.
Humbled.
I
think humbled to have been part of that. Yeah.
It helps me not live with regret. Even there are times we moved to places that we didn't really know, and maybe we didn't make the best decision, but we saw lives changed. And you look back and you go, was all worth it.
Yeah.
You know, at the end, I think looking back, all the moves that we made, and it was all worth it.
Yeah.
And even if I don't think it was worth it, it still was worth it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
You know, that hasn't changed.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think even being reminded, like when you go to a conference and just on the heels, we almost didn't even go to the conference. We're thankful Hammers pushed us to go. But being at the conference and just seeing people from different parts of your life, different chapters of your book, you know, that it's part of your life. It's amazing to see, you know, the friendships God adds to your life and the stories of people's conversions that get added to your story. And so it's really quite an adventure, I think. And having been in so many places, it's a fun story to look back on, in spite of, you know, some of the hardships of me not wanting to move and the challenges. But I've really appreciated, you know, it's kind of like a giant quilt, and God keeps adding different squares to your quilt of places and people and things you learn.
You know, we had no idea what to expect with the conference, and we were kind of going through a tough time and some challenges out here, and we weren't going to go. And then the Hammer said, "You guys got to go, and we're paying for you to go." I mean, that's friends right there.
Right.
And so, but we go there, and our schedule, we fill up every lunch and dinner with people from 35 years ago, and all these relationships and all these people whose lives we've impacted and who have also impacted our life. It was a family reunion. And so I look back, I'm glad that Bethany brought that up, because we were just like, it's amazing to see the lives that we've been able to impact through all the places that we've been, every place that we've been to.
Right.
And so that's pretty exciting, actually.
Yeah,
about it.
It is so exciting. And you guys have had such an amazing career. It reminds me of what Ed Townsend told me one time. He said, you know, in the ministry, you're not wealthy in terms of money, but in relationships.
Yeah.
And it's really true. When you go to those conferences, you go, man, I'm just a very wealthy man. And it's a real blessing. So Kip and Bethany, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for all the work on behalf of the kingdom and what you're doing in San Luis Obispo now. If someone were wanting to reach you or move to San Luis Obispo or support you, how would they get a hold of you?
Our church website is the 101 Christian Church. So,
and our information's on that website.
The 101, like the number 101 or
101christianchurch.com.
Yeah.
And so
we would love to have people move here.
There you go.
We could use some help.
Well, hopefully people, I'm not a bad place to move to. Absolutely.
Yes.
That's great. Guess that's the signal we need to finish our interview. Okay. But thank you so much for the time, and all the best to you guys going forward.
Thank you, Rob.
Thank you, Rob. It's been an honor. Love you.
Thank you so much for joining the Rob Skinner podcast. If you're enjoying this podcast, please hit the subscribe button and let your friends know about it and how to find it. Because my goal is to inspire you to make this life count, live a no regrets life, and multiply disciples, leaders, and churches. Have a great day and make this life count.